After Lead Stories fact-checked a story by the National Pulse, they published an article accusing us of bias in favor of the Democrats after first quietly correcting their story. Several of the accusations are blatantly false, for example that Lead Stories co-founder and chairman Perry Sanders would be a devout Democrat. He is a registered independent who has donated to Democratic, Republican and Libertarian campaigns. The story conveniently ignored the fact that one of our other co-founders, John C. Gaeta, is a registered Republican. The remaining two founders who actually make the editorial decisions, Alan Duke and Martin Schenck, never donated and are not registered voters. Other claims in the story were highly misleading and omit crucial information. On July 17, 2020, Lead Stories fact-checked an article from the National Pulse titled, "Exclusive, Black Lives Matter website, Defund the Police Donations Go to Act Blue, the Biden for President campaign's top source of donations," that claimed to be an exclusive but merely repeated insinuations made earlier by several other people days before. The story misleadingly claimed donations for Black Lives Matters went to payment processor ActBlue and implied that the Joe Biden campaign would profit from it. Similar claims were debunked by PolitiFact, FactCheck.org, the Associated Press and the Columbus Dispatch. As part of Lead Stories' work under Facebook's partnership with third-party fact-checkers, we gave the story a rating of partly false. Under the guidelines of the program, that rating is reserved for content where, quote, "The claims of the content are a mix of accurate and inaccurate, or the primary claim is misleading or incomplete." End quote. In this case, our determination was that the story was misleading because it implied the donations were not going to Black Lives Matter but to ActBlue and from there to other recipients. Note that being rated does not remove or delete a story from Facebook. Rating causes a label to be added to the link or post in question with additional information. But the link or post itself remains available. Publishers are given the option to dispute a rating or to issue a correction by contacting fact-checkers via the email addresses publicly listed in the guidelines. Lead Stories also lists this email address on its contact page, along with instructions on how to submit an appeal or a correction. The National Pulse chose to ignore the guidelines and the instructions and instead directly called our editor-in-chief Alan Duke on his cell phone. Alan was driving at the time and asked if they could send him an email or call back later. Shortly after this, Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of the National Pulse, sent following tweets, quote, "Alan Duke didn't want to speak, and urged me to email him to start the appeals process. He then hung up. Why should I appeal to some guy I've never heard of, at some website I've never heard of, to appeal a story that I know to be factually accurate? Raheem Kassam, at Raheem Kassam, June 17, 2020." End quote. The National Pulse never contacted us with a formal appeals notice, nor did they add a correction notice to the story. They just silently changed the headline and kept in the implication that the Biden campaign might profit from the donations. Lead Stories did reach out to him via phone later to ask if he still wanted to appeal, but the call went to voicemail. On June 18 they then published an article titled, "Exclusive, Facebook's fact-checker Lead Stories is staffed by exclusively Democrat Party donors, CNN staffers, and Defeat Trump activists." They never contacted us before publishing it. It contained several untrue or misleading statements that we wish to respond to. Quote, "The National Pulse stands by its reporting, and upon contacting Lead Stories editor-in-chief Alan Duke by telephone, were told he would not discuss the matter, and that the only way to appeal was by email. No email address was given." End quote. The email address was right on the same contact page where they presumably found Alan's phone number. Quote, "In a clear-cut example of the lack of transparency from the fact-checkers, when National Pulse editor-in-chief Raheem Kassam attempted to connect with company co-founder Alan Duke, a near 20-year CNN entertainment reporter, Duke refused to speak about the matter." End quote. He did not refuse, he offered to talk later when he wasn't driving or to handle it via email. Quote, "Lead Stories chairman and founder Perry Sanders is a devout Democrat, donating over $10,000 to political campaigns, every penny going to Democratic candidates." End quote.